Hello, hello, test check 1, 2. How's it sounding? Very good. Let's get this thing going. There I am. Sweet. Hello and welcome to another Ableton Live Office Hours stream. Today is going to be probably a shorter stream than normal. It is my birthday today, but I'll probably take off a little bit earlier than I normally do, but I've missed a couple office hour streams for the last couple of weeks, so I want to make sure that I get some time with you guys to hang out and talk a little bit about making music with Ableton Live. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I think as of right now, I'm probably going to be hanging out and working on this track. This is one of the song a week songs that I've been doing. And for those of you guys who are not aware, I'm writing a song a week. And recently I made the decision to every couple weeks give myself a catch-up week to go back and finish and finalize some of these songs. So that's what this week is. So I'm going to be working on, this is week number 7 from this year. This is the song I was working on, and so it's really close to being done. I feel like it just needs a little final tweaks before I give it the final mix and master treatment. So I'm gonna go through that, tweak it a little bit, share what I'm working on, but feel free if at any point during the stream, if you have any questions, things you want to talk about, things you want to get into, feel free to just toss those in the chat. What's up, Jason? How are you doing today? And thank you for the happy birthday wish. All right, so as I had mentioned, this is a track, it's not like a million things going on here, but it's got a decent amount. I might play it a little bit and then kind of like talk about it as I'm going through and working on it. But this is probably one of my favorites of the Song Week challenge that I've done so far. And this was made primarily using my sci-fi sound design patch that I made in a video a couple weeks back. So that's where a lot of the sound design is coming from. Issue number 1, that kick is not doing it for me. I actually like it quite a bit. It just needs a little bit more impact, so I'm trying to find another kick to layer it with. I feel like that could work. No. Try this one instead. Too distorted, I think. What's up, Beatmaker? How you doing? No party hat. The headphones, you can't wear a hat and headphones at the same time. It makes it really difficult. Jason, I generally mainly use Ableton Live devices for most of my productions. There are definitely a number of exceptions to that, so it's not specifically a song challenge thing that I'm trying to keep in the box with live stuff, but that's just generally how I work for the most part. Thank you, Bishop. Appreciate it. But like I use like Shimmer and Valhalla Vintage Verb in here a little bit. I think most of the synths here, I got Wavetable, I got Operator. I think everything else is Wavetable for the most part, and maybe a few other operators here and there. So yeah, so it just happens to naturally be mostly in the box Ableton Live stuff, but that's not a specific thing I'm going for. In fact, for my next one, I'm probably gonna try to use a bunch of like weird reactor things or something a little different, just to break up the workflow a little bit. All right, I might need to beef up this bass a little bit more. So oftentimes one of the things I like to do is to, if I'm going to make major changes to a sound like this, I'm going to duplicate the whole track, leave this one here as the original one, and that way and mute it. And that way if I screw it up, I can always just go back the way it was. Oh, Bishop, I appreciate the super chat. That's awesome. Yeah, we can definitely talk about mixing. I can definitely have it without it. Shoot me an email. That's probably the best way to sort that out. I know you mentioned it earlier, but we can definitely figure that out. Jason, I have not used the Roland Cloud subscription. I've got mixed feelings about a lot of the Roland stuff. I think some of it's cool, but I'm not like a super big fan of a lot of the stuff they do. So Bishop, I've thought about doing like a vote or suggestions on Song of the Week stuff. The thing about the Song of the Week stuff, because it's so just like fast paced, it's like, all right, next one, next one, next one. I feel like a lot of that process for me that I'm finding is about just like letting ideas just come out and kind of seeing where they go. And so I feel like if I had a bunch of like genre restrictions and things like that, I feel like that might like play with the workflow, but I'm definitely open to it. It's definitely something I could be into. It's something we could definitely talk about. I'm definitely open for suggestions for like, obviously topics for videos, or if like, there's some time during one of the Patreon streams for like, hey, how would you make something in this kind of style? That's probably where I would do it for something like that. But I'm not opposed to the idea entirely. Let's try that again. So there's no strings in this. It's mostly a bunch of pad sounds, and I think so. It's probably either these guys. Those or that. Just more like a synthy sound. It's probably those are what you're thinking of. Most of the atmospheric, more kind of pad sound kind of things, except were made with the sci-fi sound that I made in that video a couple weeks ago. So it's basically, it's wavetable, it's one oscillator, playing a chord, a little bit of movement on the fold as well as the wavetable position. And then it's kind of like a bandpass filter here. I'm going to get rid of the highs, and then I've got a LFO on the filter frequency here to give it a little bit of motion in the mid-range. And then it's just lots and lots of effects, really. It's a phaser, hybrid reverb with really heavy settings, really high dry wets, echo, also pretty heavy dry wets here, chorus, saturator, and then it's also being sent to 2 pretty heavy reverbs. So if I take a lot of that stuff out, it'll sound a lot flatter. I like take off those 2. It also has this kind of like longer, weirder kind of volume envelope. So that's what it sounds like without the reverbs. This. I think it sounds all right. And then if you toss on the reverbs. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how a lot of the sound design came out. And then these guys were like way up here. Obviously it's being sidechained. You can hear the sidechain up there. The other thing I've been doing a lot with these kinds of sounds, what's up, Kevin? How you doing? Is spreading out my chords. So instead of having them all play in the same octave, I'll do something like, probably have seen me do this. Take the middle note and pitch the middle note up an octave. And now it's the same chord, but it's just spread out differently. Or I'll kind of like take 2 of the notes and pitch them octave, and one of them still a low octave. And that way you get these really nice wide frequency ranges. Like that. But this patch, more or less, I mean, I tweaked it a little bit for this particular sound, but this patch is available for download in the description for that video. It's the one with Ryan Gosling on the thumbnail. Nice, I'm glad to hear that, Kevin. All right, I'm not convinced about this guy. The fast arpeggiator. I'm not sure if it's accomplishing the goal I want it to compared to what's happening over here. This is the slower arpeggiator, whereas this one's a little bit faster, or a lot faster. I think it's better without it. So I think by itself it's fine. So I'm gonna, once again, do the thing that I do where I'm gonna mute the original version, and then I'm gonna try something that's still complex, but maybe not quite as fast. What if we do a little bit of grain delay? I haven't used some grain delay in a while. Beatmaker, I occasionally get into the MPE stuff. I don't end up spending a lot of time with it usually, just because I have this spend a lot of time with the MPE stuff. I think to make it sound really good or make it really useful. So I tend not to use it as much as I like to. Yeah, I'm not convinced by this ARP. Also, if there's anybody who's just joining us, right now I'm just kind of working on this track, but if you have any questions or things you want to talk about, feel free to toss those in the chat, and we will definitely get into it. Getting a little better, I think. Hey Josh, how you doing? Thank you. Yeah, this is one of the songs that I am catching up on. This is one for my Song of the Week challenge. This is week number 7. Automate the on-off switch on the arpeggiator. I could do that. I was also thinking about just making the notes shorter. This is something I'll do quite a bit for this kind of thing, where I don't need them to go quite as crazy on the arpeggiator. I don't mind that, really. Kevin, I don't mind talking about things we talked about before. That's totally an option if that's what you're into. Song analysis, however, though, I keep getting copyright strikes anytime I try to do that. So maybe some other time we'll do song analysis. Email is probably the best. Actually, put it in the Discord and then just do like @me in the Discord, and that's probably the best way for me to check it out. Or email, whichever one of the two is easier for you. It's kind of cool. I don't mind that. That's like a sound. All right, let's duplicate this bad boy. Let's have a different one be our response with, let's try something like that, something like that. I think it's just Catalyze musicacademy@gmail.com is the email. That totally just gets lost in the mix there. Jay, appreciate the birthday wishes. Thank you very much. I feel like this thing should be something, like the response should be something totally different. Like I need to get more different with this. So maybe... thank you, Joshua, as well. How can I make this similar enough to this that it's interesting, but also totally different. It is indeed my birthday today. Yeah, the reverse sound is it's the same thing as my snare, but then just reversed with different effects on it. And I think some of them are pitched up and some are not. Which is why that one's a little scratchy, but like, it's a really easy, fun way to like just give some energy to your transitions. Thanks, Sasha. I appreciate it. This is one of my favorite sounds in the whole song. All right, we need to automate some more effects in here. A little more shimmer as we go along. I do something kind of similar. Also, once again, just in case anybody is curious, if you have any questions, things you want to talk about, feel free to toss this in the chat. Right now, I'm just kind of having some fun doing some automation on this track I'm working on, but I am not committed to just talking about this one thing. We're gonna start really heavy on the reverb on this one. What's up, after party? How you doing? Yeah, Kevin, we can definitely talk about mixing. Give me 1 second to finish the thing I'm thinking about right here. Yeah, so mixing obviously is a topic that people are asking me out a lot. And there's a lot of advice I can give on mixing, and I think to me there's two kinds of mixing advice. There is technical mixing advice, which is like, you know, boost your kick at 110 hertz to add more punch, or like, I don't know, EQ out this frequency, or like that kind of stuff. And then there's more kind of like philosophical advice on mixing, which is more about like understanding the aesthetic that you're going for and understanding like what it is, what's the ultimate goal of your song, and how are you going to combine all the elements in your song in a way that is not only interesting and engaging, but also sounds good and sounds really clear. So for me, I think a lot of the technical stuff is it's good and it's helpful and it's interesting, but it's very specific to what it is you're doing, right, at any given time. So like being able to see or hear somebody else's song, I can give much better general mixing advice than I can just like thinking about the concept of mixing and the technical side of mixing. Because I think that a lot of people in the mixing world, in the production world, in the music world just in general, and especially in the YouTube world of music, they put a lot of stock into the technical side of mixing, where it's like if you EQ your snare just right, then you're good to go. And if you do this, it's gonna, like, if you do X, Y, and Z, it's gonna be perfect. And over the years of mixing and producing, one of the things I've learned is that the technical things are useful, but they're not what made me better at mixing. What made me better at listening is spending a lot more time thinking about like how I want my song to sound, and really focusing on like what are the things I can do to achieve those goals. So I'll talk about that for a little while because I think it's interesting and it's fun to talk about. I think it's really useful, and I think people on YouTube don't really talk about the philosophical approach to mixing as opposed to the technical approach to mixing. I mean, I've heard your tracks, and I've heard a lot of your tracks that sound really, the mix sound really good. Um, and I think that like I try not to talk too much about mixing because I think a lot of people, especially people who are newer to producing, think that their songs are perfect and the mix is what's holding them back, when really it's the song that's holding them back and the mix is fine. But I've heard your tracks and I think they sound pretty good. And I think that like, yeah, you need to spend a little bit more time with the mix, but I think that like, I think you can do that by yourself, and I think you can like make it, make it sound like a whole, the one man army kind of thing of making your music. So let's talk a little bit about kind of like goals of your mixing and things that I've done that I feel like have really helped my mixing. Number one is listening skills. People say this a lot, like, really listen and like use your ears and things like that, but they don't often like expand upon that and really describe like what it is you're listening for and how you can use your ears. So this is something I mentioned on stream before as terms of techniques, and that's as you're listening to a song, any song that you like, song that you think sounds good and is mixed really well, close your eyes and try to hear every individual sound and identify it. And be like, okay, I can hear the voice, I can hear the chords, I can hear the, not just the drums, but like each individual sound of the drums. What am I hearing in there? Are there multiple layers? Is it two guitars or is it one guitar? Is it, how many vocal layers are there that you can hear? Is it just one layer, or is it two main layers, or is it three main layers, or is it three main layers and plus backing layers? And I feel like being able to not only identify each individual layer is a really great skill for understanding, what instruments and what things are including in there. This is especially important for dance music. A lot of, EDM, a lot of dance music, house-based music, whatever, they use lots and lots of different layers. And one of the, techniques that they're using that I'm sure you guys are aware of is that like they're using multiple different layers, especially of bass sounds, together to make it sound all like one bass sound. In dubstep, it sounds like one morphing bass line. It sounds like one sound that is like moving from the next to the next to the next. but it all sounds like one sound, right? So being able to listen and identify each one of those sounds and kind of divide and conquer and separate them out, just as an exercise for developing your ear, fantastic thing to do. You should be doing that all the time when you're listening to music. And then once you've kind of developed that skill a little bit and have started to be like, okay, I can listen to a song, I can identify every single sound, and I know what those sounds are. You don't need to know what every single synth sound is, but you can hear them and you can tell what's going on. Then do the same thing, but start thinking about, okay, what sounds are grabbing my attention the most? And this is the thing that changed everything for me in my mixing. Is not just understanding each individual sound, but understanding that like mixing is about directing your listener's attention to specific sounds at specific times. And that's, to me, is the difference between a good mix and a bad mix. In a good mix, the more important sounds will be grabbing my attention first. And then the supporting sounds will be grabbing afterwards. And then the like far away sounds or the like more supporting sounds will be kind of audible, but they're not grabbing my attention. And this has to do with a lot with just like our ears and our brains and how we process sound. The way we process sound is louder sounds get more attention, right? That's just like a basic survival technique. If you're out in the woods and you hear a loud sound, you need to pay attention to that loud sound. Whereas quieter sounds, our brain can kind of filter out and they're not as important. So the same thing is true when you are mixing music. The louder a sound is, the more it will grab your attention. Just default. So going back to what I was saying about like technical advice on mixing, a lot of people get really, granular about their advice on mixing. But one of the biggest tools, the biggest tool is just the volume control, the track volume control. If you want something to be more present in the mix, make it louder. If you want it to be less present in the mix, make it quieter. So just using your volumes to emphasize more sounds or de-emphasize sounds is 100% the name of the game to me when it comes to mixing. That's like 80 to 90% of my mixing is just making sure my volume is in the right place. The other 10% is going to be the compressors, the EQs, the panning, all that other stuff. So a lot of my heavy lifting is happening with just the volume controls, combined with sidechains and compressors and things like that. So if you have been practicing listening to other people's music, you can not only identify individual sounds, but also identify how important that sound is in the mix by comparing the volume of them, right? So if you think about, listen to some pop music song, listen to the volume of the vocals compared to the volume of the kick. Which one of those two is louder? And if you can listen to that and you can hear that and you can identify that, that gives you such a big advantage when you are going in and mixing your own stuff. Because then okay, my vocals are here, my kick should be here relative to the volume of my vocals, right? So by listening to other people's music, identifying what sounds are in there, and then which are the more important sounds, and then be paying attention to volumes as relative to other volumes. This is also a really important concept when it comes to mixing. So a loud sound by itself can be loud, or it can seem loud or not loud. But a loud sound next to a quieter sound makes the louder sound sound louder because you have something to compare it to, right? So having a relative volume makes a really big difference. If you have two really loud sounds playing at the exact same time, neither one will sound that loud because there's nothing to compare them to. So using your volumes once again, thank you, Tara, I appreciate it. To use your volumes to have quieter sounds, so you have louder sounds to compare them to, creates not only dynamics, dynamic range, which makes a song interesting and is a great way to add emotional changes to a song. But it makes the louder sounds sound louder because there's something to compare it to, right? So understanding that, especially when it comes to like things like mixing drums, we tend to think of drums as like, it's one instrument, but it's obviously it's a bunch of different instruments. And when I'm mixing my drums, I'm very, very concerned about the volume of the kick drum relative to the volume of the snare, right? One of those two things is generally going to be louder than the other. Sometimes they might be pretty close. Sometimes one might be way quieter. But these two sounds have a very important relationship with each other. And I'm very concerned about that when I'm mixing. And that's one of the things I can generally hear pretty easily when I listen to somebody else's mix is the kick too loud or too quiet? And is the snare too loud or too quiet? Because if either one of those things are off, it can throw off the entire mix. So be thinking about that in terms of like all of your drums, right? Making sure that the more important drum sounds are louder than the less important drum sounds. You have things like your hats, your percussive layers, all that kind of stuff. Same thing is true for like vocal layers, right? You're going to have more important vocal layers and you're going to have less important vocal layers, and making sure that the two sound good with each other and are not competing with each other is really, really important. So yeah, understanding volumes, relative volumes, and then listening, right? I spend a lot of time when I'm mixing closing my eyes and just listening and thinking about, okay, where is my brain gravitating? What is my brain focusing on? And then ask myself the question, is that what I want my audience to be focusing on and that at that given part of the song? Right? So, and this may vary a bit depending on what style of music you're making. If you're making country music, kick drum, not important in the mix. It can be way, way quiet, and that's totally fine. But if you're making dance music, kick drum's got to be mega, mega present in the mix. It's got to be super loud, it's got to be super clear, and it's got to cut through that mix to make sure people can hear that to dance to it. Right, so be thinking about what's grabbing your audience's attention, and then is that what you want your audience to be paying attention to? All right? And then, oh, thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate that, Sasha. And then from there, be thinking about, okay, what's the second kind of, or what's the second sound that's grabbing my attention? So like close your eyes, think, okay, what's grabbing my attention the most? That's the number one sound. And then think, okay, what's grabbing my attention the second most? And then again, ask yourself the question, is that what you want your audience to focus on the second most? And then go through layer by layer, just closing your eyes and listening and asking yourself the question about like, okay, is this the most important thing? Yes. Then is this the most important thing? Yes. Is this the most important thing? Yes. And then keep going down to the list from the loudest sounds down to the quietest sounds. Just by doing that and understanding relative volumes, all that kind of stuff, your mixes will sound way better. Like that to me, that was the thing. Once I started doing that, my mixes went from sounding okay to sounding better than okay, I guess. So use that as an exercise. Lots of listening, lots of active listening. And then when you're listening to your own music, when you're listening to other people's music, be thinking about these sounds as a hierarchy, right? And there are more important sounds and there are less important sounds. And part of your job as the mixing engineer is to make sure the more important sounds are really easy to hear and the less important sounds are audible, but not getting in the way of the more important sounds. So yes, that's like some really generalist mixing advice. Another piece of the mixing advice that I like to give out that's kind of technique based. This is something I learned from a friend of mine who mixes for a living. And the thing about mixing that I found is that if you don't pay attention, it takes forever. I don't know if you guys ever experienced this, mixing your own tracks, where you are like, all right, I just spent 20 hours mixing this song and it sounds exactly the same as it did 15 hours ago. And that I think is one of the hard parts about mixing, is that because you get so detail oriented and you get so granular and so focused on like little tiny microscopic things, you forget the big picture and you end up wasting a bunch of time in your mixing process. And I used to do this and it was a pain. So the way I've started to get around that is to basically make a to-do list. So what I'll do is I will start the song from the beginning. I will listen to the whole thing the entire way through, start to finish, without stopping, without doing anything. But while I am listening to it, I'm going to have either like a note-taking application open or something like that, and I will write notes about what I'm hearing. Does anything sound too loud? Anything too quiet? Is there a sound that needs some work? Is there something that's missing reverb? Something needs to be sidechained? Anything I'm noticing in the mix that needs some work, I'm going to basically add it to a to-do list for the whole song. And then after I've listened to the whole song, beginning to end, I will basically one by one check off the things on the to-do list. So if I'm like, hi-hats are too quiet, I will turn them up a little bit. Oh, and then, this sub bass is not loud enough, I'll turn that up a little bit. And go through and kind of like one at a time, check off the things on the to-do list. Then what I'll do is I will go back to bar 1, listen to the whole thing, beginning to end, and write down everything on a to-do list, and then check off the things on the to-do list. And once you do that, about, 4 or 5 times, maybe more than that, each time you do this, you'll hear new things you didn't hear before, right? Smaller little details you didn't hear before, and you'll be able to focus in closer and closer into little tiny details. But by the time you do that a couple of times, your mix should be sounding fairly polished, or at least sound fairly decent. And this is a huge difference than what I used to do, a long time ago, which was just constantly be turning things up and down. To be like, oh, my sub needs to be a little louder. No, that's too loud. Let me come back to it. And then I'm working on something else. I'm like, oh, now I need to go back and then turn this up again. Work on something else. Now I need to turn this back down again. You end up jumping back and forth between different ideas quite a bit. And that's where I was wasting all my time. It'd go up by a decibel and then down by half a decibel, and then up by a decibel and a half, and then down by 3/4 of a decibel. Just constantly changing my mind about everything because I didn't have the big picture context for it. So that technique I found took my mixes from taking, 15, 20 hours to taking 3 to 4 hours and getting things that sounded better, or at least as good, if not better, in, a third to a quarter of the time. So that technique for me has also changed a lot about how I mix, is just listen to the whole thing, start to finish, write down what you need to do, take it out, and then do it again. And then it's a great way to stay focused while mixing, because like I said, mixing is a world of rabbit holes you can fall into. It's just black holes where you just start working on one thing, you're mixing your drums, and then you notice something about your bass, and you spend 2 hours mixing your bass, and then you forget what you're doing, and you end up, losing where you were and wasting a bunch of time. So try that method out as well. That's a great way to get your mix sounding better in less time, which is, I think, saving time is massively important when you got work and life and things to deal with on top of making music. All right, and then Josh was asking, hopefully that answers your question. That's a lot of stuff about mixing. I could talk about mixing for a long time. So let me know if there's anything else you want to talk about. So Josh was asking, how do you feel about doing broad volume automation in specific tracks, like boosting drums 1.5 for the hook? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's something I would generally recommend doing. I think, going back to some really kind of generalist mixing advice, when there are more layers to your sounds, there's more competition, right? So some things need to be louder, some things need to be quieter when there's more layers. When I have like a little more kind of, break section, something like this, where it's like, it's 3 sounds. It's got the percussion, it's got the sub bass, and it's got this little synthy guy, and one more, 2 synthy guys. So there's not as much going on there. So these sounds can be louder than the exact same sound when there's lots of layers happening, right? Because they're not competing with as much. So I will absolutely automate certain sections to be louder or quieter based off of what's happening during that section. Yeah, so the drums might need to be louder during, the big, drop or the climax of the song. And a lot of times I'll do that in a group-based situation. So for the, I'll just do it on the whole drum group where, this little part here, they can either be a little bit quieter or a little bit louder. And that's a fantastic thing to do to kind of change things as the song goes on. Generally, I will do that more kind of like automated volume somewhere in the middle to the end of my mixing workflow. I'm much more concerned about doing automation or getting the generalist big picture volume, relative volume situation sorted first. And then once I've got that settled, and I've done a few rounds of kind of my listen all the way through, write down notes, mixing, then I'll go through and start adding automations. So yeah, definitely broad volume automations is something I recommend pretty regularly because, because you have different layers happening in different parts of the song, each section of the song is going to sound different, and it's going to require slightly different takes on mixing. Doesn't always need like whole brand new things, but it definitely helps out. Cool. So yeah, let me know if you guys have any other questions about mixing. It's a really fascinating topic to me, and I think that the other really generalist advice I have for mixing is don't overthink it. The more complicated you try to make your mixing, the more likely you are to waste time and get something that doesn't sound as good. I've been doing a much more minimalistic approach to my mixing, and it's making my life a lot easier. Like I said, I'm focusing really heavy on volumes, still adding EQs and compressors and things like that, but focusing a lot on letting the volumes do a lot of the heavy lifting in my mix, and then kind of going from there. One more thing. The other thing is less is more. The more layers you have in your song, the harder it is to mix. And there are definitely certain situations where you need to go in and you might just have too many layers. Like as you can see, I like deactivate clips a lot in my productions. So just by getting rid of certain layers creates more room for you to hear other things. And this is also especially true if you're like me and you like really heavy reverbs and delays. Reverbs and delays will absolutely just eat up space in your mix. So if you're going heavier on reverbs and delays, be sure to EQ those. Be sure to, there will be situations where you might be like, you know what, this is going to sound better if I get rid of that one sound in that section, or get rid of the sound in this section. So using subtractive arrangement or kind of subtractive mixing and deleting things that don't need to be there, if it's not pivotal to the song, if it's not adding something to the song, get rid of it. And that's a fantastic, really easy way to clean up your mixes, is to just declutter them a bit. And all of a sudden it opens up all the space and you can hear everything way better, and it makes your life way, way easier. So I hear that a lot when I listen to tracks in like the song feedback sessions where people just have one too many layers, and a couple of the layers are just not, they're not making the song sound any cooler. So you need to get rid of them. And I know it can be hard to get rid of them. Even just like creating space, kind of like what we did earlier, where instead of having chords that go from one to the next, like have them be shorter, and then you have negative space here. Music is oftentimes about the space in between the notes, and that's also true for mixing. Having negative space in your mix allows a lot of room for you just to do more with it, and can be really, really helpful when it comes to actually mixing. Cool. So I'm going to give this song a listen to from start to finish, and I'm going to see if there's any other big things I need to focus on for this track. It's feeling, about ready. Let's get in there. It's getting real close to being done. So we're going to check it out, see how I feel about it. Feel free to let me know if you have any suggestions, comments, questions, things about this track. But yeah, let's see what it sounds like. feel like that first section needs like one more textural kind of thing, like a little glitchy sound or something. Are you talking about this guy? My computer is getting a little freaked out there, but you get the idea. Hopefully they didn't get too many dropped frames there. And everything's still working. Give me 1 second. All right, so are you talking about after party, the sound that happens right here? That's literally just, I just took my snare sound, which just sounds like this. And then I duplicate it, froze it, and then reversed it to create the reverse snare. And then I just put a bunch of delay on it and a bunch of reverb as well. And sometimes I pitch it up just to kind of give it that kind of like dubby little sound. Yeah, this is something I do quite a bit, just to add like a little bit more kind of like dynamic movement with the drums. Is just take whatever your snare is, reverse it, and then sprinkle in reverse snares here and there. They create this nice kind of little like suction kind of sound, and it's really a fantastic way to break things up a little bit, make things sound cool. If you're like me and like you feel like this song doesn't deserve like a full-on like big huge noise sweep kind of build drop kind of thing, it's a nice way to kind of subtly like creates the expectation that something's about to happen. And then I just went crazy with the delay to make it kind of echo out for a while. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about this track. I like it quite a bit. I feel like the arpeggiators, I want to get a little bit more out of them, tweak them a little bit more. And then maybe like one more kind of like textural sound could be kind of nice, especially for the intro. I like what's going on with the intro so far. But something else that lives in there could be kind of cool. I'm trying to think like what kind of sound would go well. I don't know, some kind of like scratchy percussive kind of thing. We'll see. I'll play around with it for a little bit. Cool. Well, I think that's going to be it for today's stream. I'm going to take off a little bit early and go hang out with some peeps for my birthday. But I appreciate you guys coming in and hanging out and asking questions for the stream. I will be back tomorrow for an office hour stream where I'll be doing more of this kind of stuff, or not office hours, a Patreon only stream tomorrow. Where I'll be doing more of this kind of thing, producing stuff, finalizing some tracks I've been working on, getting things either ready to mix or mixing them or mastering them to get those all ready to go. If you're not a Patreon member, you can check that out and should be linked below. And then on Wednesday, I will once again be doing a song feedback stream. So you guys can send me tracks, whatever it is you're working on, and I will take a listen to it. But thanks everybody who popped in, asked any questions. Also, big thanks to all the super chatters today. I really appreciate it. Yeah. You guys have a really good afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you're from. And I will see you guys later. And thanks for all the birthday wishes.